The Election Commission of India will announce the schedule for this year's general elections at a press conference tomorrow. The media briefing will be live streamed on social media platforms of the ECI. It's going to begin at 3 p.m. Indian Standard Time. And the newly appointed election commissioners Gyanesh Kumar and Sukhbir Singh Sandhu, they took charge of their office on Friday. They were appointed as election commissioners by a selection panel which was led by the Prime Minister and comprising leader of the main opposition in the Lok Sabha and a union minister. The two vacancies were created in the Election Commission after the retirement of Anup Chandra Pandey in February and the resignation of Arun Goel recently, days ahead of the Lok Sabha polls 2024. The new commissioners, they have joined their offices to help the poll body conduct these elections. Gyanesh Kumar is a 1988 batch IAS officer of the Kerala cadre. He retired as secretary in the Ministry of Cooperation and also served as the secretary in the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs previously. Sukhbir Singh Sandhu is also a 1988 batch IAS officer, and this is from the Uttarakhand cadre. And Sandhu had served as the Chief Secretary of Uttarakhand in 2021. And joining us with more on the story of the elections being announced, going to be announced tomorrow, we're joined by Prasar Bharati correspondent Saubhagya Kar, joining us from the newsroom. Saubhagya, briefly put into context, the scale of an Indian general election.
Mark, the wait is finally over. The polling dates for the, will be announced tomorrow for the world's biggest election. And in a way, you can say that the democracy of Festival of Democracy will be kickstart tomorrow. If you remember, in the last previous general elections in 2019, dates were announced on March 10, 5 days before. March 10, 2019, dates were announced. And it was a 7-phase elections, considering the vastness of India and the topography, demography. So this time also likely to be, the elections will be many phases. Mark, ahead of the announcement of the general elections, Chief Election Commissioner Rajiv Kumar, he took stock of the situation and probably briefed over 2,000 general observers, police observers and expenditure observers and instructed them to be a level playing field for everyone. Mark?
Yes, we leave it there. Thank you very much, Saubhagya, for those details. Now, in the latest update from Israel and the Hamas conflict, Hamas has presented a Gaza ceasefire proposal to mediators, which includes a first stage of releasing Israeli women, children, elderly, and they have also proposed to release the ill hostages in exchange for the release of 700 to 1,000 prisoners. Hamas said in its proposal that a deadline for an Israeli withdrawal from Gaza would be agreed upon after the first stage. Meanwhile, thousands of Israelis took to the streets on Thursday calling for the release of hostages. They marched from a Tel Aviv square, and the protesters carried enlarged images of women taken as hostages by Hamas on October 7.
We want to achieve talks. We want people, we know that bringing them back alive is by talking, by diplomatic people, by people that are good in negotiating. They should do their job. They should have the chance to do it. The military gave them the chance. Now it's time to to give the stage to them.
There is a deal that we can do right now, but it seems like they don't want to do it, and they do everything not to do it. But they've got to do it because they're not going to survive. They're going to come back all dead. I want that Ofer will come back home alive. We've got a family that's waiting for him.
Well, this is as the Israeli lawmakers on Wednesday had given their final approval to an amended 2024 state budget to fund its operations in Gaza. The parliament members voted in favor of the spending package of $160 billion. The plan also includes higher allocations for health, education, police and welfare. Additionally, the IDF has been expanding aid efforts as well for Gazan citizens on multiple fronts. And DD India's Alex Kadir joins us now live from Jerusalem with an update. Alex, Netanyahu hasn't accepted any truce offers from Hamas in the past. Is there any pressure, on the domestic front that may make him change his mind?
Well, there's a lot of pressure on the domestic front, particularly from the families of those hostages. There is a broad consensus across the country that a deal should be reached if it is reasonable with Hamas to release those hostages. We know that Prime Minister Netanyahu just yesterday, for the first time in 6 weeks, met with some of the family members of those hostages being held in Gaza, and in the statement they said that it is the Prime Minister's responsibility to secure their release, and they can finally envision embracing their loved ones again, and that they urge the Prime Minister to give them that right. We've seen these families protesting every Saturday without fail since the October 7th atrocities, since their loved ones were taken. There is a lot of political pressure in favor of that deal. A poll back in December suggested that 67% of Israelis supported a deal to release the hostages. But it's crucial to say that although a lot of the coverage and a lot of the global reaction sees this as a ceasefire deal, the perception in Israel is very much that this is a hostage deal. This is a deal to release those hostages taken by Hamas, and if a ceasefire is needed to allow that to happen, then so be it. But the primary focus, the primary pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu is the release of those hostages.
Indeed, and then, but how much support is there for the Gaza war itself now that the Knesset has approved that $160 billion funding package?
Well, the support for the war is steady, it's high. The Israeli population are very supportive of this war. To give you a sense, 75% in a poll out just last week support a further operation in that southern Gazan city of Rafah, where 1.5 million Palestinians have sought refuge. Now that goes against the wishes of the international community, against the wishes of the Biden administration in Washington, the administrations in London and Berlin for other Israeli allies as well. So clearly the domestic support for this war remains strong. The objective of Prime Minister Netanyahu, which is the complete eradication of Hamas, maintains its support levels within the Israeli population, even though they don't necessarily have support for Prime Minister Netanyahu individually. Politically, we've also seen members of the war cabinet consistent in their support for this war. The opposition also offering their support when it comes to the release of the hostages and the eradication of Hamas. So that broad support for this war remains still very strong here in Israel.
Alex Kadir from Jerusalem, thanks very much. Meanwhile, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has appointed his longtime economic advisor Mohammed Mustafa to be the next Prime Minister to reform the Palestinian Authority. Mohammed Mustafa is a leading business figure in Palestine. His appointment comes after mounting pressure to overhaul and revitalize the governing body of the Palestinian territories and to improve its governance in the West Bank, where it is based. Mustafa had helped organize the reconstruction of Gaza following a previous conflict, and he replaces the former Prime Minister Mohammed Shataya, who along with his government recently resigned in February, in fact. And as President Abbas still remains by far the most popular figure in the Palestinian Authority, the appointment of the new government is a demonstration of his willingness to meet international demands for change in the administration. Australia has become the latest country to resume funding to the United Nations main Palestinian relief agency. Australia had consulted with both the UNRWA and other donor countries and was satisfied with the additional safeguards put in place. The Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong announced that some $3.9 million in paused funding will be released immediately. The resumption came almost after 2 months after it was paused. That had paused ties, in fact, over allegations that some of the agency's employees had participated in the October 7 Hamas terrorist attack. Sweden, Canada and the European Union have resumed funding to some degree, and the organization's head said last week that he was cautiously optimistic that other donors would resume funding as well.
The best available current advice from agencies and the Australian government lawyers is that UNRWA is not a terrorist organisation and that existing and additional safeguards sufficiently protect Australian taxpayer funding. Australia has been working with a group of donor countries and with UNRWA on the shared objective of ensuring the integrity of UNRWA's operations, rebuilding confidence, and, so importantly, ensuring aid flows to Gazans in desperate need.
And amid growing tensions around the Red Sea, the US military said on Thursday that it had destroyed 9 anti-ship missiles and 2 drones in Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. The army said that the Houthis fired 2 anti-ship ballistic missiles from Yemen toward the Gulf of Aden and 2 missiles towards the Red Sea, with no injuries or damage reported to US or coalition ships. The request of the former US President Donald Trump to dismiss a criminal case that charges him with illegally holding onto classified documents after leaving the White House was denied. The ruling by the U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon in Florida came just hours after a hearing in which his lawyers argued that the central charge in the case is improperly vague. Cannon was appointed to her post by Trump, and she ruled that question warrants serious consideration but should not be decided at this point. Trump had pleaded not guilty to a 40-count indictment that accuses him of illegally taking sensitive government documents with him when he left the White House in 2021. It is one of 4 criminal cases that he faces as he tries to win back the White House. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is expected to win the Northern Mariana Islands Republican presidential contest. This is happening Friday. The 14-island nation, which will help the former president add to his delegate count ahead of November's presidential election. Here's Nick Harper's report.
Northern Mariana Islands are actually nearer to China than mainland United States, but they are a US territory and therefore holding the Republican Party caucus this Friday, with Donald Trump looking to clinch all 9 of the available delegates that are up for grabs. Trump, of course, is now the only contender in the Republican primary race, and earlier this week won enough delegates in the state primaries to become the party's nominee. It means he'll go up against the incumbent Democratic President Joe Biden in November's election. Biden himself won the Northern Mariana Islands Democratic primary on Tuesday. Around 55,000 people live on the islands in the Pacific Ocean, which formerly became a US territory back in 1986. The southernmost island of the territory, Guam, an important US military base, holds its Republican caucus on Saturday. However, while the territory can vote for presidential nominees in the primary contests, the residents there cannot vote in the general election come November. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.
What's still to come here on DD India News Hour? Russians are voting in a presidential election. 60 people feared dead as a migrant vessel bound for Italy capsizes in the central Mediterranean. Severe weather wreaks havoc across the US Midwest.
We are taking a close look at the phenomenon of military bases, military infrastructure, and military facilities in the maritime domain and what they do to enhance a country's naval power.
We are the ones who are, assuring them that we will help each and every smaller country, whether it is you want infrastructure from us, we will go and provide it. You want ships, you want boats, or you want any kind of help, a bigger nation is there to help you out.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lin. Voting has begun in the Russian presidential elections, the first day of a ballot that will be held across 3 days. The incumbent, Vladimir Putin, is all but certain to win against three challengers, none of whom has criticized him. Putin's popularity is also high amid strong support for Russia in its conflict with Ukraine. Putin's approval rating is currently 86%, up from 71% shortly before the invasion of Ukraine, according to the Levada Center, which is a respected Russian pollster. The Russian television and social media operation project has put Putin as a robust patriot. Now, Dasha Chernova joins us with more on this story. Dasha, it is an election, but for the Russians, is the outcome a foregone conclusion?
Well, that's right. We understand that most Russians are indeed going to re-elect Vladimir Putin for yet another term as Russia's president, so he will remain in power until 2030. That has become possible after the amendments made to the Russian constitution in 2020 that nullified the previous two terms that he served. We also understand that to the moment, all the polling stations across the vast territory of the country have opened. To the moment, the Central Election Commission says the turnout is over 5% across the Russian Federation, but the voting will be taking place for 3 days in a row. It is the first time that Russians are voting in the presidential election for 3 days. They also have an opportunity to cast their ballot online, and many have done so already. We understand that in Moscow alone, the number of voters has exceeded 1 million, and obviously the authorities are doing a lot to make sure that the turnout is high.
Dasha, also, are there any issues that influence a voter's choice? How serious now is the concern that Russia's future is at stake, as President Putin puts it?
Well, that's right. The Russian president has issued a statement on the eve of this election saying that it is the civic duty of every Russian to come to the polls in this year's presidential election. The understanding among the Russians is that indeed Vladimir Putin is the only and the right candidate to lead the country for the next 6 years as a man who will be able to ensure Russia's security, stability and stable development. That also includes the understanding in Russia that the operation that was started in Ukraine will need to be over, and it is only with the leadership of Vladimir Putin that it will be possible. According to the public opinion polls, the operation in Ukraine has only solidified and consolidated public opinion around the figure of the Russian president. Economic-wise, also, there have been several initiatives that have been started under the presidency of Vladimir Putin, and the understanding among many Russians is that that has to develop. In the meantime, we have seen cues of people who are willing to add their signatures to the pro-peace candidate Boris Nadezhdin. He failed to meet the criteria to be on the ballot, but nevertheless the cues that we have seen are also indicative that there are those who do not support the ongoing course, who want an alternative candidate, who want some other options, as well as the thousands of people whom we have seen at the cemetery in Mariana district when there was the funeral for the Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, labeled as terrorist and extremist in Russia. So certainly the understanding at the moment is that the Russians are making the right choice by voting for the incumbent president, but obviously there are questions as to what happens in the country by 2030.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Dasha Chernova, for that update. Now, in the latest from the conflict, the Russian Defense Ministry on Friday said that it had shot down 7 Ukraine-launched missiles over Russia's Belgorod region. Meanwhile, 3 children were killed after Ukraine shelled an apartment building in the Russian-held city of Donetsk in the eastern Ukraine on Thursday. This comes as explosions of drones were seen in Kiev during a Russian attack on the Ukrainian capital early on Friday. 36 Russian drones and missiles had struck communications infrastructure in northeastern Ukraine earlier on Thursday, and television and radio signals were knocked out in 5 cities and towns. Russian aerial attacks continue more than 2 years into a full-scale invasion targeting the energy system and military production at different junctures in Ukraine. The French President Emmanuel Macron said that Europe should prepare for war if it wants peace, citing Russia as an adversary that would not stop in Ukraine if it defeated Kiev's troops in a two-year-old conflict.
Il y a 2 ans, nous disions jamais on enverra de chars.
If the war were to spread in Europe, it would be Russia's only choice and responsibility. But to decide, us today, to be weak, to decide today that we would not respond to it, is already to be in defeat. But that I do not want.
Escalade, nous ne sommes pas en guerre contre la Russie. Il y a 2 ans, nous disions.
Meanwhile, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz will host his French and Polish counterparts in Berlin today in a bid to project European unity on support for Ukraine after weeks of friction between the allies. A hastily arranged summit in Paris last month had aimed to give fresh impetus to the stagnating Western efforts to help Ukraine repel a full-scale Russian invasion that has entered its 3rd year. Instead, the French President Emmanuel Macron's refusal to rule out deploying Western troops to Ukraine triggered a dressing down from Scholz, highlighting long-running divisions between the European Union's two top powers. The Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, said that Ukraine is running out of ammunition and NATO members are not doing enough to help Kiev on Thursday.
There is no imminent military threat against any NATO ally. NATO continues to ensure there is no room for miscalculation in Moscow about our readiness to protect all allies. With more forces, higher readiness and increased defense spending.
Well, in fact, news now about Nepal, and the government of Nepal has confirmed that 7 more Nepalis are serving in the Russian army and they had lost their lives. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry of Nepal has said that the government has continued its diplomatic efforts with top priority to repatriate Nepalis who were recruited for the Russian army. The ministry reiterated Nepal's policy not to allow Nepalese citizens to recruit in foreign countries' armies except for some under their traditionally existing agreements. In a tragic incident, as many as 60 people are feared to have drowned on a vessel carrying migrants across the central Mediterranean from Libya to Italy. The central Mediterranean is one of the world's most dangerous sea migration routes. According to the United Nations Migration Agency, almost 2,500 migrants died or went missing last year and 226 since the start of 2024. Let's take a look at other stories making the news around the world. Unidentified attackers in Somalia's capital stormed the Sil Hotel near the president's office on Thursday evening after a pair of explosions went off. The hotel is a popular gathering place. This is for government officials and lawmakers. Al-Qaeda-linked terrorist group Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for this raid. A Michigan jury has convicted the father of a teenager who fatally shot 4 classmates at a high school in Michigan of manslaughter. Both father and mother are to be sentenced on the 9th of April over manslaughter penalty of up to 15 years in prison. The U.S., country with persistent gun violence, has experienced a series of school shootings over the years. New Zealand's Muslim community on Friday marked the 5th anniversary of the Christchurch shooting that left 51 Muslim worshippers dead in 2019. The worshippers in Christchurch had gathered at a memorial at Al Noor Mosque, where one of the attacks took place, and they were praying, and also they left floral tributes there. Farmers in Vietnam's Mekong Delta have been affected by drought and salinization. So this has forced them to adapt their farming practices to suit nature's whims. The farmers are using rice shrimp and rice crab rotation, and they're raising goats as an alternative livestock. And severe weather has wreaked havoc across parts of the Midwest and the United States, with tornadoes touching down in Indiana and nearby states on Thursday. The storms caused widespread damage to houses and vehicles and also destroyed trees and power lines. The storms were part of a night of violent weather that stretched from the northeast Texas to Ohio. In Haiti, violence appears to flare up once again after a brief lull following Prime Minister Ariel Henry's announcement of resignation on Monday. A powerful gang leader has issued a threatening message aimed at political leaders who would participate in a planned transition council. Meanwhile, a fire broke out at the main penitentiary. It was emptied of prisoners by the army earlier this month. Thick black smoke billowed out from the facility, but the fire appeared to be out by Thursday afternoon. National Police Chief's house had also been set on fire on Thursday. Heavily armed gangs have taken over much of the capital, and the rights groups have reported widespread killings, kidnappings, and sexual violence as well. Argentina's Senate has voted to reject the President Javier Milei's December presidential decree that rolled out a series of economic reforms. The decree faces a second vote in the country's lower house. The decree, which originally contained over 600 articles, was rejected in a vote of 42 to 25 with 4 abstentions and can only be definitively discarded if it is also rejected by the Argentinian lower house. The president's party has a minority in both chambers. Milei is an outsider economist whose party has a minority in Congress, but he had taken office in December and has used his powers of presidential decree to roll out measures ranging from privatization to labor reforms. Mass celebrations took place in Dakar, which is the capital of Senegal, on the release of the Senegalese opposition firebrand Ousmane Sonko and the presidential candidate Bassirou Diomaye Faye. Their release had been expected after Parliament had passed an amnesty law on March 6. The election, which authorities wanted to postpone for 10 months, is now due to take place on March 24. And still to come here on DD Indian News Hour. President Murmu to grace the global spirituality Mahotsav in the southern Indian state of Hyderabad. The Philippines President Marcos is going to discuss security matters with the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken early next week. U.S. Special Operations aircraft practices airdrops with South Korean commandos.
Why have the big 5 powers of the United Nations Security Council seen no change in 8 decades? Who is stalling reform of the world body, and for how long can we wait? Are we truly alone in the universe, or are there aliens who keep playing hide and seek with us? Watch Connecting the Dots to get the full picture every Friday at 8 p.m. IST on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lynn. Here's a recap of our main stories. Well, the Election Commission of India is going to announce the dates for the big general elections in the country. It's going to happen tomorrow at a press conference. Bhutan's Prime Minister Topgay continues his 5-day visit to India. He calls on India's President Murmu And Prime Minister Modi has accepted the invitation sent by the King of Bhutan to visit Bhutan. Russians across a massive landscape and also several time zones have begun voting in a presidential election. The voting is also taking place in the annexed regions of Ukraine. Putin has told the voters that they are going to determine Russia's future. Hamas has offered two-stage peace plan. The first stage is to release Israeli women, children, and elderly and ill hostages, but they want 700 to 1,000 Palestinian prisoners freed in exchange. And the next stage is to set a date for a permanent ceasefire. India's President Draupadi Murmu will be gracing the Global Spirituality Mahotsav in the southern Indian city of Hyderabad. This is happening Friday, and the four-day, one-of-a-kind spiritual congregation, it commenced yesterday with the inaugural performance by the renowned singer Shankar Mahadevan. It's organized by the Ministry of Culture, and the event is bringing together over 300 spiritual gurus from all faiths and beliefs. It's going to happen at one platform at the world's largest meditation center. The Global Spirituality Mahotsav is being held with the main theme of inner peace to world peace, and will host multiple panel discussions, an exhibition showcasing India's spiritual history, and an immersive experience through books and music. Beautiful theme, inner peace to world peace. Now, Bhutan's Prime Minister Tshering Tobgay has called on India's President Draupadi Murmu at Rashtrapati Bhavan in New Delhi on Friday. The Bhutanese Prime Minister arrived in India on Thursday on a 5-day official visit at the invitation of his Indian counterpart, Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And Prime Minister Modi is all set to visit Bhutan next week. The announcement was made by the visiting Bhutanese Prime Minister on Thursday. Prime Minister Modi and his Bhutanese counterpart had held bilateral talks and discussed ways to deepen economic and people-to-people ties, among other things, at a meeting yesterday. Furthermore, Prime Minister Tobgay also thanked Prime Minister Modi for his steadfast support to Bhutan. And Bhutan's Prime Minister Tobgay also visited Rajat in the national capital, where he paid floral tributes to the father of the Indian nation, Mahatma Gandhi. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday addressed a public meeting in the southern Indian state of Tamil Nadu. The women, Bharatiya Janata Party leaders, felicitated the Prime Minister, welcoming Prime Minister Modi during a public rally in the state's Kanyakumari city. Addressing the gathering, the Prime Minister accused the state's ruling DMK and Congress of being involved in corruption. He said that while the BJP government at the centre gave the country achievements like Digital India, the DMK Congress committed the 2G scam.
डीएमके और कांग्रेस का इंडी अलायंस कभी भी तमिलनाडु को विकसित नहीं बना सकता। इन लोगों की हिस्ट्री घोटालों की है। इन लोगों की राजनीति का आधार लोगों को लूटने के लिए सत्ता में आना है। एक तरफ बीजेपी की कल्याणकारी स्कीम होती है, दूसरी तरफ इनके करोड़ों के स्कैम होते हैं। हमने ऑप्टिकल फाइबर और 5G दिया, हमारे नाम पर डिजिटल इंडिया स्कीम है, इंडी अलायंस के नाम पर लाखों करोड़ रुपए का 2G का स्कैम है।
India's Defence Minister Rajat Singh inaugurated the first dedicated building complex for the Indian Navy headquarters. The Nausena Bhavan, it was inaugurated in the presence of the Chief of Naval Staff, Admiral Hari Kumar, and also the Chief of Defence Staff, General Anil Chauhan. The Defence Secretary and the Secretary DRDO were also present. And this building has 3 wings and is a 4-storied configuration which meets all the present and future requirements of the Indian Navy. The complex has been designed using innovative technologies, systems, as well as materials with due stress on energy and water conservation, as well as solar generation, leading to optimization and economy in capital and recurring costs. The Indian Air Force Chief, Air Chief Marshal V.R. Chaudhary, addressed field commanders of Maintenance Command at the Commanders' Conference held in Nagpur. The Chief of Air Staff, in his address, appreciated the vital role being played by the HQ, or the Headquarters Maintenance Command, and its units towards the sustenance of various fleets and systems. During the visit, the CAS also apprised of the efforts initiated towards achieving self-reliance in the assigned tasks. Mauritius's Coast Guard ship Victory arrived in the Mauritian capital Port Louis. This happened Friday following a refit in the southern Indian city of Visakhapatnam. The MCGS Victory, it was escorted by the Indian Naval Ship Suata, and both forces conducted joint exclusive economic zone surveillance. This reinforces the Indian Navy's commitment to enhance maritime security in the Indian Ocean region. A special yoga session was conducted on board the Indian Naval Ship Suata. This is during a port call in the Mauritian capital of Port Louis. Around 50 personnel, 50 personnel from both the Indian Navy and the Mauritius National Coast Guard participated in this session, underlying the importance of physical and mental well-being. 6 heritage properties from the Indian state of Madhya Pradesh have been added to India's tentative list of UNESCO's World Heritage Centre. The permanent delegation of India to UNESCO took to X to share the good news. The 6 heritage properties from Madhya Pradesh include Gwalior Fort, the historic ensemble of Dhamnar, the Bhojeshwar Mahadev Temple, the rock art sites of Chambal Valley, the Kuni Bandhara, and the Gond Monument of Ramnagar. Addition to the tentative list is mandatory in case in the future a property is to be nominated for inscription to the World Heritage List. India, along with the United States and 53 other members, have proposed a first United Nations resolution on artificial intelligence. It's aimed at ensuring the new technology is safe, secure and trustworthy, and that all countries, especially those in the developing world, have equal access. The resolution calls on member states to promote safe, secure and trustworthy AI systems to address the world's greatest challenges, including those related to poverty elimination, global health and food security, climate, energy and education. Members resolved to bridge the artificial intelligence and other digital divides between and within countries through capacity building, increasing digital literacy and other actions. The statement establishes a shared vision that AI systems should be human-centric, reliable, explainable, ethical, inclusive, privacy-preserving and responsible, with a sustainable development orientation and in full respect, promotion and protection of human rights and international law. It also affirms principles that will help make that vision a reality. This resolution is a historic step forward in fostering safe, secure and trustworthy AI worldwide. Let's take a look at some other stories making the news. The Supreme Court of India has ordered the State Bank of India to publish electoral bond numbers which reveal the link between donors and political parties. A 5-judge constitution bench led by the Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud, reconvened today to hear the application filed by the Election Commission. As per March 11, 2024, order, the Election Commission on Thursday uploaded the data on electoral bonds furnished to it by the State Bank of India. The next hearing will take place Monday. India's Ministry of Coal launched the third tranche of e-auction of critical and strategic minerals on Thursday. A total of 7 critical mineral blocks are being put up for auction as composite license. These 7 blocks pertain to critical minerals such as glauconite, graphite, nickel, PGE, potash, lithium and also titanium, and are spread across different states. People covered each other in color as they played Herbal Holi, the festival of colors, in the North Indian city of Mathura. People gathered at Raman Rethi Ashram and also played with the colors and flowers. The Filipino President, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., will be meeting the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken early next week. They're going to tackle cooperation and security matters. The visit, Marcos, in fact, this meeting, Marcos has vowed to defend the Philippines' maritime claims after Chinese President Xi Jinping called on the armed forces of his country to coordinate preparations for military conflicts at sea. Their meeting comes on the heels of heightened tensions between the Philippines and China over territorial disputes in the South China Sea. A 2016 ruling by the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague had found that China's sweeping claims had no legal basis, but Beijing has rejected that ruling, claiming indisputable sovereignty over most of the South China Sea. China, Iran and Russia conducted a 4-day joint naval drill from the 11th to the 15th of March. This is near the Gulf of Oman. The trilateral event, it was called Security Bond 2024. It concluded on Friday and it featured maritime exercises including nighttime firing at sea, light communication, anti-piracy and rescue exercises. The 3 sides took turns to command and coordinate closely. The drill aims to promote trilateral exchanges and cooperation. A U.S. Special Operations MC-130 aircraft practiced airdrops with a brigade of South Korean commandos during drills on Thursday. The drill was conducted on the last day of the Freedom Shield exercises, and the U.S. Special Operation troops in South Korea are training and preparing for unexpected threats at a time when global crises are more interconnected than ever before. This drill holds relevance amid North Korea's growing nuclear arsenal as well. SpaceX's Starship rocket, designed to send astronauts to the moon and beyond, completed nearly an entire test flight on its 3rd try on Thursday. However, as SpaceX said, the rocket was destroyed during its atmospheric re-entry. But during a webcast of the flight, SpaceX commentators said that the mission control had lost communication with the Starship from 2 satellite systems simultaneously while the spacecraft was re-entering the planet's atmosphere at hypersonic speed. Elon Musk is now counting on the Starship to fulfill his goal of producing a large multi-purpose next-generation spacecraft which is capable of sending people and cargo to the moon later than this decade, and also ultimately flying to Mars. Still to come here on DD India News Hour. The US President Joe Biden is signaling his opposition to Nippon Steel's $14 billion acquisition of US steel. In the Indian Wells tournament, Carlos Alcaraz survives a bee swarm to buzz Zverev, and he's booked a semi-final spot. And football governing body FIFA has announced the Under-17 World Cups to be held every year from 2025.
we are taking a close look at the phenomenon of military bases, military infrastructure, and military facilities in the maritime domain and what they do to enhance a country's naval power.
We are the ones who are, assuring them that we will help each and every smaller country, whether it is you want infrastructure from us, we will go and provide it. You want ships, you want boats, or you want any kind of help, a bigger nation is there to help you out.
Wherever news breaks, whatever it takes.
Connecting corners, cutting across continents.
Stories that matter from across the globe.
Accurate, authentic journalism that serves you right. From politics to glamour, from sports to world affairs, with a fusion of aesthetics and substance. Introducing news in a new avatar. Experience the world through a new lens. Stay tuned to DD India for an exciting journey beyond borders.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lynn. Losses in the Asian market on Friday followed Wall Street's tech-driven drops as expectations for timing and frequency of interest rate cuts by the Federal Reserve were dampened by hotter than expected U.S. inflation. And for the first time this month, the U.S. benchmark bond rates maintained close to 4.3% threshold that they had attained on Thursday. The dollar advanced to its highest since March 5 against a basket of major peers. Crude oil fell following its overnight spike above $85 per barrel for the first time since November, but it is still expected to rise by almost 4% this week. The U.S. President Joe Biden is signaling his opposition to Nippon Steel's $14 billion acquisition of U.S. steel. And it comes after the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump said that he would block the deal if he comes in as president. This is Chris Gilbert reporting from Tokyo.
Reports are that there is heavy lobbying that has been taking place for months now on Capitol Hill. The U.S. Steelworkers Union is heavily against the acquisition, as are some lawmakers, both Republicans and Democrats, who have been urging the president, according to reports, to spike the deal using national security powers. And Cleveland-Cliffs, a competitor for the acquisition of U.S. Steel, has also reportedly been lobbying on Capitol Hill as well. But analysts are saying that if this deal goes ahead, if the acquisition happens, it may actually be a good thing for U.S. Steel. The injection of capital from Japan and the strong automotive industry here, which works very closely alongside Nippon Steel, into U.S. Steel may be good for the workers, may be good for the unions, and may be good for the manufacturing sector in the U.S. Analysts also are saying that scrapping it based on national security grounds may also scare away other foreign investors. Chris Gilbert in Tokyo reporting for DD India.
The Japanese automaker Nissan is considering seeking a business partnership with the domestic rival Honda Motor. This is on key components for electric vehicles. The potential partnership with Honda could help Nissan gain economies of scale in producing EVs. This is crucial for the Japanese automakers as they face heavy competition from China's BYD, Tesla as well, and other electric vehicle makers. And the heads of these two automakers are due to hold a joint press conference in Tokyo on Friday. Japan's biggest companies have agreed to hike wages by 5.28% for 2024, the highest in 33 years. The decision comes as the Bank of Japan looks close to ending 8 years of negative interest rate policy. The Bank of Japan officials said that the timing of the pivot would depend on the outcome of this year's annual wage negotiations. Policymakers, they hope that hefty pay rises will boost household spending and produce more durable growth in the broader economy. Japan's economy narrowly avoided slipping into recession late last year. Okay, it's time now for all the sports news, and with me is Abhishek Mahajan. Over to you, Abhishek.
Thank you, Mark. We'll start with badminton story. In fact, Indian shuttler Lakshya Sen will take on former champion Lee Zijia on Friday in the All England Open Championship. Earlier on Thursday, Lakshya Sen came off from behind in the third game to beat Danish world number 4 Anders Antonsen 24-22, 11-21, 21-14. This was the first win for Lakshya against Antonsen in the last 4 matches. Lakshya is leading 3-1 against the Malaysian shuttler. Meanwhile, world number 1 duo Satvik Sairaj Ranki Reddy and Chirag Shetty lost to former All England champions M. Fikri and Maulana 16-21, 15-21 in the second round. In women's singles, 2-time Olympic medalist PV Sindhu suffered a straight game defeat against South Korea's An Se-yong. In women's doubles, Tanisha Crasto and Ashwini Ponappa also went out in the round of 16 after taking the opening game against Zhang Enzheng of China. This leaves Lakshya Sen to be the only Indian contention in the quarterfinal stage as PV Sindhu, Satvik, Chirag, Ashwini, Tanisha made their way out. All right, Narayan Singh is joining us from the newsroom. Narayan, good afternoon. We'll talk about Lakshya Sen. I mean, he didn't have good starts in 2024, but now he's come back well. He's in unbelievable form now. Semi-finals of the French Open last week and now beat world number 3 to enter the quarterfinals in All England. We expect a good competition in the last 8 clash.
True, as you mentioned, Abhishek, the past 6 months have been very tough for Lakshya Sen. 7 consecutive first round exit we have witnessed in the past 6 months for Lakshya Sen, and after that the separation from coach Anup Sridhar, and after under the tutelage of the Vimal Kumar we saw the rise of this talented shuttler again, and last week we saw he was in the semi-finals of the Paris, and here in Birmingham on Thursday he was trailing 2-8 in the deciding game, and it was like a deja vu situation for Lakshya Sen because few days back in Paris in the semi-final when he was against the current world champion Wisterden, the scoreline was same 2-8, and where he couldn't arrest the fall, but here it was again the situation was like that only, but Lakshya Sen showed his cool and composure and just tackled that situation, and he won last 15 points out of the 17s and booked his berth to the quarterfinal of this coveted tournament. And all in all, we can say that Lakshya Sen has the potential, and this tournament especially is very important considering the fact that it's the Olympic year, and any Olympic National Olympic Committee who has 2 players in the ranking between 1 to 16 will have the right to send.
All right, Narayan, you say
Lakshya
Sen has a potential. It will be interesting to see how he performs in the quarterfinals. Only 2 Indians have won All England in singles, Prakash Padukone in 1980 and Pullela Gopichand in 2001. Thank you, Narayan. We'll live with that. From badminton to tennis, Carlos Alcaraz survived a swarm of bees that caused a nearly 2-hour delay and went on to a 6-3, 6-1 victory over Alexander Zverev to reach the semi-finals of the Indian Wells Masters on Thursday. Alcaraz swatted at the bees buzzing around him before running for cover, and the match was suspended 19 minutes. And with Alcaraz serving tied at 1-1, the match resumed after a delay of 1 hour 48 minutes. Alcaraz showed a phenomenal all-court game, sealing the victory by breaking the German for the 4th time and taking his winning streak in the Californian desert to 10 matches. And women's singles top seed Iga Swiatek reached the semi-finals at the Indian Wells after former world number 1 Caroline Wozniacki retired with an apparent foot injury on Thursday. Wozniacki started strongly as she raced into a 4-1 lead, but she was soon left frustrated as Swiatek produced a barrage of winners to storm back and win the set 6-4. The then gestured to her opponent that she was unable to continue after having trouble with the problem on her right foot once Swiatek had taken a 1-0 lead in the second set. Swiatek will face Marta Kostyuk for a place in the finals after the Ukrainian defeated Anastasia Potapova of Russia 6-0, 7-5. Football now. World Soccer's governing body FIFA said on Thursday that Under-17 World Cup will be held annually instead of biennially, with the next 5 editions from 2025 to take place in Qatar. Like the Senior Men's World Cup, the Under-17 tournament will be expanded to 48 teams, FIFA announced, and the Women's Under-17 World Cup will also be played annually from 2025, with Morocco hosting an expanded 24-team event until 2029. The 2022 edition, won by Spain, had 16 teams. All right, that's all we have in Sport Stories. Back to you, Mark.
Thanks a lot, Abhishek, and really looking forward to Lakshya Sen playing later today. And let's now take you to Copacabana Hotel in Rio, which showcased the French artist Daniel Bourrin's artwork. This is on chromatic facade balconies. Well, that's all we have in this edition of DD India News Hour. Let's know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us then on Facebook, X, which was formerly Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Mark Lynn, and with me is Abhishek. And thanks very much for watching DD India News Hour. Namaskar.